Creation of a simple part. Click on the new file icon, take the pre-selected part, and right now we'll accept the default name, and we'll use the default template and say OK. I'm moving this out of my way. We have our standard 3 frames. I am going to come over here to the right hand side, collecting the sketch tool. I'm going to select the front plane. You see how it has said front here, and it is pre-selected the reference, and I will click on the sketch button. The planes reorient themselves, and we have 2 reference axes which I can now dimension off of. I'll come over here and I will click on the rectangle tool. I will allow myself to snap to the center, clicking with the left mouse button and completing the rectangle with a second click of the left mouse button. Getting out of the rectangle command by clicking on the arrow. We have 2 weak dimensions that are showing up. I will click on one, double clicking and changing this to a default value of something convenient, 300 in this case. Coming over to the second dimension, double clicking, and I will change this to a dimension of 175. Once this is done, I can click the check mark to say I'm done. The screen refreshes and I have a pre-selected sketch. I'm going to use the middle mouse scroll wheel to scroll back and forth, and holding down the scroll wheel and moving my mouse, I'll give myself a side view. Now with the sketch pre-selected, I'll come down here to the extrude icon. It might be in a different location depending upon where you are or what version of the software you're using. I'll click on extrude. Okay, we have a handle that allows me to pull it back and forth. I can click on the yellow arrow to flip sides, or I can come up here to the dashboard. Again, I can flip the arrow and I can choose my depth of this first extrusion, so I'll make it 150. Hit enter, and once I hit enter, we have the green check mark here which allows me to finish the extrusion. Now the whole part is selected, that is why it's red. I'll just click anywhere in the window, and now I will choose one of these sides to make a new sketch on. I will select this plane. Again, allow it to default the reference and click sketch. Now here I'll use a rectangle, and I'll allow it to my first corner to snap to this plane, and I'll come down and allow myself to snap to the second reference plane, clicking the arrow button to get me out of that command. I'll now double click on these weak dimensions. I'll make this one 150, and I'll make this one 100, and I will click the check mark to say that I'm done, middle mouse button to rotate my shape, and I will click on the extrude. Notice it's moved positions here in this case, and I will allow this one to be an extrusion to add in material. Again, if I and I will come up here and allow myself to create this to be 125, hit enter, and I'll say that I'm done. So now I have 2 parts, or it's a single part made up of 2 extrusions. Now I will click onto this side. I'll click onto this top plane, again accepting the default reference. Now I will put in a series of holes here. One. Now notice I have a guide bar, which we'll talk about in the class next week. And notice how it snaps to give me all the same radius of the circle. I will say that I'm done. Now I'll come over here and double click some of these. I'll set the diameters to be 30. I'll let this offset be 40. I'll let this dimension here be 40 as well. This dimension to be 125, and this dimension here to be 250. Now I'll rotate, say that I'm done here, and I didn't choose, I'll choose extrude. Now I'm going to flip directions. I am going to tell it to remove material. Notice how the arrow, the yellow arrow, points inside the sketch circle, and I am going to come up here and choose the icon to tell it to go all the way through the part. It says extrude to intersect with all surfaces. And once I've done that, I will click OK, or the check mark, and now I have holes through my part. And now let me put in one more piece. As I said for the homework, I want something to be created with three additions onto the main block that you make. And we'll have one more sketch. I'll sketch on this plane, again accepting the defaults. And now I'll just use a rectangle. I will say, oh, I will click the arrow bar. Double clicking on my dimensions. I'll make this 100 by 125 with an offset here of 20 and 20, and I'll say that I'm done. And now I'm going to extrude it, but in this case I'm going to remove the material so it becomes a non-filled box. I'm going to flip the direction, and now I'm not going to go all the way through the part. I'll go to say I'll just pull the bar here. I'll say go to about that. I'll make it 230 up here on the dashboard, and I will say OK. So now you can see that I have only gone through a couple holes, not all the way through, and that gives me the part that I want. I can come up here and click standard orientation. Now you don't have it in the classroom right now, but there's also an isometric option that I can choose, which I will do. Alrighty, that's it for creating the first simple part.